So I'm not so sure how many of you have heard about corpora. So if you could just have a look at the Mentimeter, and when we get to the slide, we'll see how many people might have got any background in corpus-based analysis. So just to start with, this webinar is based on a chapter. You will see the bibliographic data in the references, where I outlined how to use corpus approach to systematic literature reviews. So if you could go to the Mentimeter, and you can either use the QR code or the link in the chat, and just let me know if you have got any experience with using language corpora, whether you have heard about corpora or used it or never heard about corpora at all. Also, we might have some time to do a little bit of hands-on, or I can share some of the analyses that I will discuss in the webinar. So if you want to go to Sketch Engine and register for a free trial, by the end of the webinar, we might have a little bit of hands-on experience. So the outline for today's webinar is that we will look at what is a corpus, what is a corpus-based analysis in general and specifically for literature reviews. And I will guide you through a case study that was published in the chapter where the corpus-based systematic review was used to analyzing research on multilingual and multicultural university classrooms. I will go through the steps of applying a corpus approach to literature reviews, for example, identifying themes, focusing on how specific terms are conceptualized in the literature, and also comparing relevant terms in the literature. And at the end, I will share what might be relevant affordances and also challenges when we apply this kind of approach to literature reviews. So let me just quickly have a look at, so I can see that some of you have got experience with corpora, others have heard about it, but it seems that most of you are new to the idea of using corpora and using corpus analysis, but that's fine. Hopefully there will be new things for the people who have got experience with using corpora as well. So let's start by defining what a corpus is. These days, I like to use the term large language database instead of using the term corpus, because most people would be familiar with large language databases because of artificial intelligence. But in the 1960s, a branch of linguistics was called corpus linguistics, and the corpus itself is defined as a collection of naturally occurring texts to analyze language in use. A more specific definition highlights that a corpus is a collection of machine-readable texts, which means they can be analyzed electronically. Authentic texts, it means that these are kind of naturally occurring, not specifically written for the analysis. It is sampled, which means that it's a selection text. And in linguistics, corpora were used to represent a specific language user language variety in order to analyze the language and the linguistic variation in different contexts. So corpus-based analysis, as I mentioned, it started as a branch of linguistics, and early corpora in linguistic analysis, you could now say, were fairly small. And the main aim to use language corpora to analyze language was, to not just rely on intuition, but actually analyze real language data. Early corpora, as I mentioned, were fairly small regarding these days. It's 1 million word corpus in the 1960s, which was called the Brown corpus, was a really big corpus at that time. Then in the 1990s, as technology advanced, more bigger corpora were compiled, and there's, for example, the British National Corpus that aimed to represent British English language use that included 100 million words. And then these days, it's already possible to create corpora with many billions of words. And based on these language corpora, linguists used how language could be analyzed in terms of dialect or sociolect. Previously, linguists had invented examples that might not have been representative of typical language use, and linguists often relied on their introspection, and which were not verifiable. So in linguistics, language corpora were really important because all the analysis could be backed up with what we could call empirical data. And a corpus-based approach in general is based on empiric data, and you analyzes actual patterns of use in authentic text, and uses a corpus, a large language database, as the basis for analysis. Corpus linguistic uses computers, so there are quite a few automatic types of analysis or interactive techniques with corpus software. But at the same time, these kind of quantitative automated analyses will be complemented by qualitative analytical techniques, and I will show you some of these throughout today's webinar. Now, as I mentioned, originally corpora and corpus linguistic approach was developed for language analysis. But today, more and more, these types of analysis is used for analysis outside linguistics, for non-linguistic purposes as well. And using corpus-based approach to literature reviews is an example of that. So as I mentioned, corpus linguistics in linguistics is used as a research methodology. The research questions are within the field of linguistics, and the focus is on language and language use in different contexts. Whereas what we will be talking about today is more corpus-based analysis as a method, where we are not interested in the language use and language varieties, but actually research questions around social sciences, and focus on different aspects of discourse or maybe media representation. And specifically today, I will focus on themes in different data sets. In this case, corpora can be textual data like interview transcripts or focus group transcripts. And what we will be focusing on today is a database of research articles or chapters that are relevant in the field. And as I mentioned, corpus analysis is a combination of quantitative and qualitative analysis. You might want to say some automated analysis and manual analysis as well. And as I mentioned, today's case study was published as a chapter in this Rutledge handbook. And the systematic literature review that I will focus on today was on research on multilingual and multicultural university classrooms. So the concepts and the ideas that will be exemplified will come from this area. So let's briefly go through of the main steps of corpus compilation and analysis for systematic literature reviews. So you can see an overview of all the steps that might be included. And I will come back to this figure from time to time in the webinar. So as usual with all kinds of literature reviews, and especially with systematic reviews, you will search relevant databases for relevant research outputs, which might be research articles, or research chapters, or any other type of documents that are relevant for your particular systematic reviews. In our case, we focus on multilingual, multicultural university classrooms, higher education with what we call super diverse classroom contexts. We focused on undergraduate and postgraduate taught courses. We only included empirical studies, and we only included journal articles that were published in peer-reviewed journals between 2013 and 2022. And this collection of, it was in the end, I think, 93 different research articles. This is what we would consider as the corpus for this particular systematic literature review, or in other words, the data set of literature for this corpus-based analysis. The next step then is to kind of clean and prepare your corpus for use with specific corpus tools, specific corpus analysis software. And in order to these texts to be able to work with these software, you have to clean the data. Often corpus tools will probably only be able to analyze text files, whereas often research articles you will have in the form of a PDF. So some corpus tools can analyze PDF texts as well. So cleaning the data might include deleting irrelevant sections of the text. Often it is useful to delete, for example, the references section, because especially with automatic analyses, that might skew your data, because that will be a very dense, the words will be used several times in the references, and that might not necessarily reflect the actual literature in the field. In some cases, you might only focus on some sections of the research articles, for example, conclusions or further directions in research. So you can create your corpus just based on these specific sections. And often corpus tools will automatically give little tags to each word, identifying their part of speech, whether that's a verb, a noun, or an adjective, which will help you make more specific analyses in the analytical part. And after you've prepared your corpus, your database, the next step is the corpus analysis. You can choose from several software. Today I will focus on analyzing what is called Sketch Engine, as I showed in the first slide. This is a fairly user-friendly software, and all the analysis I will show you can do in Sketch Engine. And also there are other software, for example, AntConc, which are a little bit, you need to download the software. So this is why I thought Sketch Engine would be a nice thing, because there you only need to register. And then you have to decide what type of analysis you do using the software. And in case of systematic literature reviews, I would recommend to start with what we call keyword lists. And I will explain in a moment what keywords are. It is also possible to analyze frequencies of different single words, or frequencies of what we call as multi-word items. So not single words, but several word long sequences. So when it comes to keyword analysis, with corpora, what you actually do is you've got your own database, and the frequency of words in that particular database are compared to the frequencies of words in what we call a reference corpus, which is usually a bigger general corpus. So in my case, I compared the frequency of words in the systematic literature review database to this 10, 10, 15 billion general English corpus. And based on analysis, you will get a list of words, each of them with a score, what we call a keyness score. And this will show how exceptionally high the frequency of a word is in your specific corpus compared to a general corpus. We can talk about positive keywords, which are more frequent, but also negative keywords, which are words that are less frequent in your target corpus. Research found that when you identify these keywords, this is often what we call the aboutness of your text. And this is why it's a really useful way to identify specific themes in a corpus of research. And I will show you in a moment how we went about this in our case study. So what you can see on the slide is the keyword list of our systematic review corpus. And you can see it's just the first 25 keywords. What you can immediately see is that there are abbreviations, for example, EMI or CLIL, and also author names. It might be, an analytical decision whether you want to include author names. We decided not to include author names in the final analysis. So from the keyword list, we actually discarded author names because we were not interested in who are the most relevant authors, but we were more interested in what are the relevant concepts and themes in the literature. Also, in case of abbreviations, you can look more closely at these abbreviations. Some of them you might be familiar with, others you might not, but it's possible to look at what we call keywords in context, so concordances, and to find out what these abbreviations actually mean and how they are used in the literature. So as you look at the keywords and you select the relevant keywords, that's actually one way of kind of identifying themes in the literature. So here is an example of one abbreviation that we found in the literature, LRI, which stands for linguistically responsive instruction. And we decided that this is a relevant term in the literature. And when we looked at all the keywords, we focused on the 50 most frequent with the highest keyness scores. And then we analyzed each of them in order to identify, groups, themes, how that might be relevant in the literature. In some cases, however, the words, just looking at the word, for example, literacy, it wasn't necessarily clear in what meaning and to what these words refer to in the literature. So again, we looked at these concordance lines to find out what kind of themes emerge relating to these terms. So looking at the 50 most frequent keywords in the literature data corpus, we identified these themes. So it seemed that the literature discusses language-related aspects, pedagogic approach and practice. It did discuss policy relating to multilingual and multicultural classrooms. There are certain actors in these contexts. Specifically, English was an important theme and how that was conceptualized as English as a foreign language or English as a lingua franca. There were also specific subject-related aspects like disciplinary literature or subject-specific literature. Then there were terms that were related to what we call academic skills, and then cultural related aspects, and then the kind of general context, educational context. So these were the themes that we identified, and what you can see on the slide is the specific keywords that were grouped into those themes. Now, coming back to the different steps, now we are in steps 4, 5, and 6, where you can select specific lexical items, words, or terms that you want to kind of zoom in onto. And you can do that by looking at their collocation patterns, which means what are the words that frequently co-occur with the terms that you identified as important. And also you can look at more qualitative analysis by looking at the concordance lines of these selected lexical items. So when it comes to collocations in different corpus analysis software, you will see several kind of statistical measures for measuring the significance of occurrence of words. And the different statistical measures will result in a slightly different list of collocations. So you might want to experiment with using one or the other statistical measures and see how relevant the different collocation lists will be for you and for your particular analysis. Some corpus analysis software can create these visualizations of specific of the list of collocations. So here what you can see is the collocates of the term internationalization in our systematic review corpus. And these are specifically the verbs that are used with the term internationalization. So that might be important to identify how different terms are used, what these terms represent in the literature. For example, in this case, internationalization seems to be promoted, it's on the increase, and it's suggested, but also redefined as it is used in the literature. So now I will move on to the term translanguaging, because we decided you might remember that this was the the highest keyword score that it received in the keyword list. And this is actually these days a fairly new concept that is used in applied linguistics, and especially in the context of multilingual and multicultural classrooms. So it seems interesting how the literature talks about, how different authors in the literature talk about translanguaging and how it is conceptualized in the literature. And for this, we use the corpus-based techniques of looking at concordances, key words in context, and also collocation analysis using a specific statistical measure. What you can do in the collocation analysis is you can group collocates according to the kind of grammatical relationship between the selected word and the other words in the collocate list. For example, using prepositions with translanguaging, or using different verbs with translanguaging. So here what you can see is a selected list of concordance lines, how translanguaging was used in the literature. And you can see some kind of patterns. For example, translanguaging used as something. So often it is used translanguaging as pedagogy, or as a pedagogical tool, or as an approach in EMI, or as a tool or practice or scaffold or set. So that suggests that often in the literature and in research articles, translanguaging is very much part of pedagogy, resources, tools, and practices in the multilingual and multicultural classrooms. Also, if we look at the concordance lines towards the bottom of the list, another collocational pattern emerges is that translanguaging is often used to do something, to scaffold or to connect or to maximize or to serve or to highlight. So that again suggests something about how translanguaging is used in these multilingual contexts as a pedagogy, but also to scaffold the learning or to maximize teaching and learning in these contexts. So looking at these concordance lines will give you an idea of how a specific term is conceptualized in the literature. Now, zooming in on these collocational patterns, you can also identify, specific list of words. I focused on the collocational pattern of translanguaging as something. And here you've got the list that was used in the literature. So translanguaging is often conceptualized as pedagogy, practice, approach, ideology, set, scaffold, phenomenon, tool, and resource. So this will give us an idea of how people think about translanguaging in the literature. And also the other type of collocational pattern, which is using translanguaging with a specific verb. We see what kind of actions are related to translanguaging, again, giving us a better understanding of how it is conceptualized in the literature. Now, in some corpus, when you look at the literature, it's often useful to compare different terms because, as fields develop, certain concepts are used, and then later on other concepts take over. And in the case of translanguaging, actually the list of colloquies showed that translanguaging and multilingualism are often mentioned together in the literature. So it seemed like an interesting comparison to look at how translanguaging is used in the literature compared to multilingualism, which is a slightly older concept in the literature of multilingual educational contexts. And this visualization demonstrates, on the left-hand side, you can see translanguaging, on the right-hand side, multilingualism. And the words in between are positions according to how frequently they are used with one or the other word. So in this case, what we actually see here is problem and feature are kind of equally frequently used with translanguaging and multilingualism. So again, we are better informed about how these two terms are used in the literature. So actually both of them seem to be an important feature in multilingual educational context, but also are maybe often a problem. And then with multilingualism, slightly closer to multilingualism, so it seems slightly more frequently used word with multilingualism is resource. And then even more frequently used with multilingualism is asset. This is not to say that these words are not used at all with translanguaging, but they are significantly more frequently used with multilingualism. Also, if we look at the verbs, we can compare, the words, which are the words that are more frequently used with translanguaging, which are the words that are more frequently used with multilingualism. And it seems that multilingualism is probably still mainstream in the literature, but equally with translanguaging, the verb foster and embrace and promote are used with both multilingualism and translanguaging. So again, we also have this way an insight into maybe how these important terms change these days, what might be differences and similarities in how they are used in the literature. I mentioned that with Corpus software, you can also analyze what we call multi-word sequences. So you can focus on words that frequently go together. So I'm just giving you the example here with all the 4-word sequences that include translanguaging. So that you can see this list here. It suggests that often it refers to higher education contexts, translanguaging practices and language, analyzing the translanguaging space. Again, we've got the idea of pedagogical approach, and then a specific type of analysis that is often used when analyzing translanguaging. So again, depending on what your literature review focuses on, you might be interested in what are the kind of immediate contexts of specific terms, but also what are the kind of more multi-word sequences that are frequently used in the literature relating to specific concepts. So this brings me to specifically discussing the kind of affordances and challenges of using this corpus-based approach to literature reviews. So when it comes to challenges, we might think about, managing long frequency, keyword, and collocation lists. In some cases, it might be overwhelming, and you will have to think about how to select the ones that are relevant for your specific literature review. These corpus searches, in some cases, they might not produce meaningful or conclusive results. So as I demonstrated, for example, with zooming in on specific terms, you might need to experiment a little bit as you go about your literature review and find the relevant types of analysis that will result in conclusive or meaningful findings in the case of your literature reviews. You have to take a very rigorous and often cyclical approach to data analysis and combine quantitative and qualitative methods. And when I mean cyclical approach, so for example, as we saw with analyzing translanguaging, you might start off with a specific term, but as we saw, for example, in the comparison of translanguaging and multilingualism, you might need to come back to the analysis and look at the terms and concepts from a different angle and add some more analysis types to identify and understand better how different concepts are used in the literature. In terms of affordances, often with the corpus analysis, this will bring different insights to the research literature and at different various levels through diverse corpus analytical techniques. So as I demonstrated before, you can use a general keyword analysis, which can often be a kind of starting point for analyzing the literature, and then you can use collocation analysis, comparing different terms and using a keyword in context in the literature. Keyword is often used in literature reviews, and that actually will give you a fairly rigorous and transparent way to identify key concepts or recurring themes, or maybe methodological approaches that are frequently and typically used in the literature. Collocation analysis or concordance techniques allow detailed analysis of different concepts, methodological approaches, operational definitions, or conceptualizations of specific terms. Collocation analysis also enhances depth and rigor because it might help you triangulate results from qualitative analysis. So collocation, the kind of automatic selection of collocations, frequently co-occurring words in the literature. And this way, this kind of analysis will help you generalize your data and enables the analysis of larger text volumes. Now, in our case, it was 93 research articles that we included in our database, literature database. But in some fields, it might be smaller. In other fields, it might be even a lot bigger. So we can say that corpus-based analysis facilitates the integration of quantitative and qualitative methodologies when it comes to literature reviews, and it can also create a more nuanced and comprehensive approach to conducting systematic literature reviews. Yeah, so I think I'll stop here and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Rigour. So I don't see any questions at the moment, but if anyone has anything they'd like to ask, please leave them in the Q&A. Okay.
In that case, it might be useful to show a little bit how you go about using this specific corpus analysis tool. And then I will conclude. So let me just find my. So I will stop sharing the slides and share the tool and just show you a couple of analyses. And then I will come back with some conclusions. Can you see the screen with the dashboard?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So this is what Sketch Engine looks like. And as I mentioned, if you would like to use it yourself, there is a free trial way. And now I have got this systematic review database uploaded into this into Sketch Engine. So maybe first I can show you how to create keyword lists. And it's fairly, straightforward. You can click on the keywords tab, and I would just go with the basic function, which means actually that there is a reference corpus already uploaded, which is the 15 billion English corpus. And if I just click on go, the tool will take some time, but it will actually come up with keywords in the literature. You can look at, different sets of them. And as I mentioned, often in literature review databases, you would have author names, like these would be author names in the literature. And depending on your focus of the literature review, you might want to discard these because they are not focusing on different themes, but different authors. But if you're focusing on who are the most influential authors in a particular database literature, then you might want to focus on specific authors as well. The tool will actually also give you what we call key multi-word items, multi-word terms. And here you've got a list of the 2-word most frequent key 2-word word sequences in this particular database. I also mentioned n-grams, and n-grams are sequences that include, from 2 to 6 words. The most frequently analyzed n-grams would be 3- and 4-word n-grams, but let's, for the time being, just focus on 4-word n-grams. And in here, what you can do is you can actually just go for n-grams in general. So let's just see what are the 4-word n-grams in this particular literature database. So this will give you often these are journal titles, which especially at the most frequent end, which might not be that relevant. Again, but you will see also terms like lingua franca, medium of instruction, content lecturers using EMI, and so on. So again, you might need to select the ones that are relevant for you in your particular literature review. And then what you can also do is, for example, in our case that I showed, we focused on translanguaging. So you can focus on 3 word sequences that include a specific word, so containing a specific word. And then I can just say translanguaging here. And then the tool will give us all the instances of 3 to 4 word sequences that actually include a specific term. So this is useful when you are focusing on a particular concept and you want to see what the literature, how it is used in the literature. And finally, I can show you the actually the word sketch, which is, I mentioned it's collocation, the collocation of patterns. So let's just again stick with translanguaging and see what the tool will give us. So what you can see here is all the, what we call grammatical relations. So the sentences where translanguaging is the object of other verbs, or translanguaging is used together with other important terms. For example, code switching would be an important one in the multilingual educational context literature, or translanguaging as I mentioned in the slides, understanding translanguaging. So you would get an overview of all the frequent words that co-occur with a particular term in the literature. And what you can also do, you can look at the context, the concordance lines. So you can look at the kind of wider context. And if you click on a specific word, it would also give you an even wider context from a particular instance of the use of the word. It is also possible to create these visualizations. So for example, I mentioned comparing translanguaging and multilingualism. And for this, you go to this function of word sketch differences. And you will get, again, in different kind of grammatical relationship, what are the frequently used words with each of the two terms. And you can compare how much overlap or how much difference there is between the two terms, how they are used in the literature. And you can also ask the tool to create these nice visualizations, which will help make it probably clearer. Okay. So I'll stop sharing and see again if there are any questions.
Fantastic demonstration of a very powerful tool, Rekha. Thank you. We do have a question in the chat. Would you like to take it?
You upload all articles included in each secretary. Yes, so what you would do when you've got your collection, like in our case, the 93 articles that we identified as part of the systematic review, you upload all of these articles because we were interested in the general themes in the literature. What you might want to consider, if you, and actually what you're saying about keywords were more prominent in certain papers. If you upload all of them, all the articles that you selected, that will help you identify the more prominent keywords in the literature as a whole, rather than pick and choose from the ones. And specifically because in some papers, they focus on some keywords. If you've got the whole corpus included in the software to analyze, that will help you identify the other ones, which are maybe used in other research articles. So in general, I would recommend to upload all the articles unless you've got already some kind of grouping or themes in your mind, and then you can focus on those articles specifically. So I see another question about how corpus methods enhance the literature review compared to more traditional review methods. So I think traditional methods refer to more qualitative approaches to literature review. So often people who conduct literature reviews would read through the literature, maybe identify what each individual paper focuses on, who are the participants. The advantage of using a corpus-based method is the kind of automated analysis, or you could get the quantitative types of analysis, because that will help us go beyond our maybe biases, or it will be more systematic in a way, because it will not only show what individual researchers find, but it will automatically focus on the frequency of different terms and concepts, and that will help to have a more systematic approach to analyzing the literature. And I would also say another advantage is the speed. Often if you analyze with traditional methods, you need to go through and read all 93 papers. I'm not suggesting with corpus approach you shouldn't read them, but what I would suggest is that helps you identify different themes quicker, and these themes might also be slightly different from what you would, with a qualitative approach, identify with a more qualitative approach. Okay.
Thank you, Rebecca. I don't see any questions coming in. Just in case people are typing away, let me also just quickly share a link to our survey. I promise it only takes 2 minutes to complete. It helps us understand what else you'd like, what else you'd find useful, and also a link to our events calendar, which is quite actively updated and populated with training events. So I'll just pop that in the chat box there, and we'll see if we have any final questions come through.
In the meantime, maybe I can share my conclusion slides, which just summarizes the main points that we've been talking about today. And we'll probably also come back to some of the questions, especially the advantages of using this kind of approach. So I would say you might have understood that, you know, the origins of corpus-based analysis comes from corpus linguistics, but there is actually a growing literature to use this kind of approach for other type of purposes and analyzing textual data in general. I mentioned that in our study, we focused on full articles. We included full research articles into our corpus, but it's possible to focus on maybe just the conclusion sections of articles or just the further directions if you're interested in, for example, what are the new avenues in the literature. This approach, the corpus-based approach, kind of leverages sophisticated methods, automated methods, often quantitative approaches, and this might bring depth and also breadth to systematic reviews. I demonstrated that, you know, it's a combination of quantitative and qualitative approaches, and this will help to deepen our understanding of the specific literature. I think also an advantage of using corpus-based method, it's kind of a meticulous way to look at the literature, and these automated searches help us identify key terms, key ideas, if you like, or themes in the literature, and it helps us have a kind of nuanced evidence of syntheses of the literature. So just the final slide, just to show the corpus analysis tool. The one that I used today was Sketch Engine, but there are other tools available, for example, AntConc, and if you go to this list, there are several other corpus tools available to experiment with using them in literature reviews. So thank you very much, and hope you found it useful.